Emotional intimacy for overthinkers. How to stop analyzing your relationships to death and actually feel connected. Your brain just did something. Right now, as you read these words, a particular circuit fired that you've been strengthening for years without realizing it. Before you even finished that first sentence, your mind started analyzing it, wondering where this is going, maybe even questioning whether this book is worth your time. That's the circuit we're going to interrupt. Chapter 1. The Think, Feel, Connect Framework. Most people who pick up this book have already read dozens of articles about attachment styles, watched videos about communication techniques, and memorized scripts for difficult conversations. You know the theory. You understand your patterns. You can explain to a friend exactly why you do what you do. Yet here you are, still feeling that familiar ache of disconnection, still catching yourself spiraling through the same mental loops, still wondering why knowing so much hasn't changed how you feel. The gap between understanding and experiencing is where overthinkers get trapped. You can describe emotional intimacy in precise detail without ever feeling it in your body. You can analyze why you shut down during vulnerable moments while simultaneously shutting down. You can think about connection all day long and still go to bed feeling profoundly alone. This isn't because you're doing it wrong or need more information. This is because thinking about intimacy and experiencing intimacy happen in completely different systems, and you've been trying to use your strongest system to access something it can't reach. The framework you're going to learn divides your experience into 3 distinct zones. Right now, you live almost exclusively in the first zone, which is why the other 2 feel so foreign and inaccessible. The thinking zone is where you spend most of your time. This is the space of analysis, interpretation, prediction, and problem solving. When you're in this zone, you're observing your experience rather than having it. You're one step removed from what's actually happening, watching yourself live instead of living. Your mind generates thoughts about feelings instead of letting you feel them. It creates stories about what connection means instead of allowing you to be connected. The feeling zone is where emotions exist as physical sensations in your body before your mind turns them into thoughts. This is the space of tightness in your chest, warmth in your belly, tension in your shoulders, and heaviness in your throat. Feelings in this zone don't have narratives attached to them yet. They're just energy moving through your system, information your body is communicating that hasn't been translated into mental content. Most overthinkers bypass this zone so quickly they don't even know it exists. The millisecond a sensation arises, the thinking zone grabs it and starts working on it, analyzing what it means, figuring out what to do about it, constructing explanations for why it's there. The connecting zone is where intimacy actually happens. This is the space where you're present with another person without the buffer of analysis between you. You're responding from your genuine emotional state rather than from your thoughts about your emotional state. Your words come from what you're feeling in real time instead of from what you've concluded about the situation. The connecting zone requires access to the feeling zone because you can't share authentic emotion if you're not in touch with it. You can share your analysis of your emotion, your interpretation of your emotion, your story about your emotion, but that's not the same thing. That's still thinking, just thinking out loud. Here's what happens in your nervous system when you default to the thinking zone. Your brain has 2 main processing pathways for emotional information. The first is fast and direct. It sends signals from your senses straight to the parts of your brain that generate emotional responses, which then create sensations in your body. This pathway operates below conscious awareness and moves incredibly quickly. The second pathway routes everything through your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for analysis, planning, and conscious thought. This pathway is slower and more deliberate. It's designed to help you make sense of your feelings and decide how to respond to them. Overthinkers have strengthened the second pathway to such a degree that it intercepts almost everything before the first pathway can complete its work. Your brain has learned to hijack emotional processing and route it through analysis before you've even registered what you're feeling. This happens so fast and so automatically that you experience thinking as your primary emotional response. Someone says something that hurts your feelings, and before you feel the hurt, you're already thinking about why they said it, what it means about your relationship, and how you should respond. The feeling gets buried under layers of interpretation before you've had a chance to simply feel it. This neural pattern developed for good reasons. Thinking protected you at some point. Maybe emotions felt overwhelming when you were younger, and analyzing them gave you a sense of control. Maybe the people around you didn't respond well to feelings, so you learned to process everything internally first. Maybe you got praised for being thoughtful and rational, and your brain kept strengthening a pattern that got you approval. Your thinking zone became overdeveloped because it served you. But what helped you survive or get your needs met in the past is now preventing you from experiencing the intimacy you want. The Think, Feel, Connect framework isn't about eliminating the thinking zone. Your analytical mind is valuable and necessary. The problem isn't that you think too much in an absolute sense. It's that you use thinking as your only tool for handling emotions and relationships. You've been using a hammer to solve every problem, including the ones that need a completely different instrument. This framework teaches you to recognize which zone you're operating in and how to move between them intentionally. When you're in the thinking zone, your experience has certain qualities you can learn to recognize. Your attention is in your head, often behind your eyes or at the top of your skull. Your inner experience is dominated by words and sentences. You're mentally rehearsing what you might say or reviewing what you already said. You're making predictions about what might happen or analyzing what just happened. Time feels either slowed down because you're hyper-focused on details or sped up because you're racing through thoughts. Your body exists as a vague background presence at best. You might notice you're tense, but only in an abstract way that doesn't change anything. The feeling zone has completely different qualities. Your attention drops from your head into your torso, your belly, your chest, your throat. Your inner experience is dominated by sensations rather than words. There might be tightness, pressure, tingling, warmth, cold, heaviness, or lightness. These sensations have texture and density. They shift and move. They have an intensity that rises and falls. Time feels present rather than past or future-oriented. Your body isn't a vague background anymore. It's the primary source of information. You're aware of your breathing, your heart rate, the position of your limbs. Words still exist, but they're secondary to physical sensation. The connecting zone combines presence in your body with openness to another person. Your attention is split between your internal experience and your awareness of the person in front of you. You can feel what's happening in your body while also tracking what's happening in them. Your responses arise spontaneously from this dual awareness rather than from mental planning. There's a sense of flow and ease, even if the content of what you're discussing is difficult. Time feels elastic and unhurried. You're not performing or managing anything. You're just there, being affected and affecting in return. The challenge is that your thinking zone will resist this entire process. Your analytical mind is good at its job, and its job is to maintain control through understanding. When you try to drop into the feeling zone, your thinking zone will immediately try to pull you back up. It'll generate questions about whether you're doing it right. It'll create narratives about what your feelings mean. It'll judge the process as silly or ineffective. This resistance isn't a problem to solve. It's a natural part of learning to operate in a new way. Your brain is simply doing what it's been trained to do. Learning to recognize which zone you're in is the first skill you'll develop. Right now, that distinction probably feels fuzzy. You might read these descriptions and understand them intellectually without being able to identify your direct experience. That's exactly what we'd expect. Your thinking zone just absorbed information about 3 zones and created a mental map, which is what it does. The actual practice of feeling the difference between zones requires repeated exposure and experimentation. You'll spend time intentionally shifting between zones, noticing what changes in your direct experience when you move from one to another. The second skill is staying in whichever zone you've chosen long enough to complete its function. Overthinkers have a habit of touching the feeling zone briefly before bouncing back into thinking. You might notice a sensation in your chest and immediately start analyzing what it means. That analysis pulls you back into the thinking zone before the feeling zone has done its work. Feelings need time to move through your system. They need to be felt completely before they naturally resolve. When you intercept them with analysis, they get stuck. The energy doesn't discharge. The sensation doesn't complete its cycle. This is why you can think about the same emotional situation for hours or days without feeling any relief. You're not letting the feeling finish. The third skill is moving between zones based on what the situation requires. Sometimes thinking is exactly what you need. When you're solving a logistical problem or planning something complex, the thinking zone serves you well. The issue isn't being in that zone. It's being stuck there. Other situations require the feeling zone. When you need to know what you actually want, or when you need to discharge emotional energy that's built up in your system, analysis won't help you. You need to drop into sensation and stay there. Still, other situations require the connecting zone, particularly moments when someone is trying to reach you emotionally and your habitual response is to retreat into your head. The framework you're learning is cumulative. Each zone builds on the one before it. You can't access the connecting zone without developing skill in the feeling zone, because connection requires the ability to stay present with emotion. You can't fully utilize the feeling zone if you don't first recognize when you're stuck in the thinking zone. This is why the book is structured the way it is. Each chapter develops a specific capacity that makes the next chapter possible. Your relationship with these 3 zones will shift throughout the process of reading this book and practicing its techniques. Right now, the thinking zone probably feels safe and familiar, while the other 2 feel risky or inaccessible. That's going to change. As you develop genuine skill in the feeling zone, you'll notice your nervous system starts to relax in ways you didn't know were possible. As you spend more time in the connecting zone, you'll discover what intimacy actually feels like in your body, rather than what you think it should feel like. These direct experiences will give you motivation that intellectual understanding never could. The work ahead asks you to trust something that feels counterintuitive. You're going to practice getting worse at something you're excellent at in order to get better at something you've never really done. You're going to deliberately step away from your most developed skill analysis in order to develop capacities that currently feel weak or dormant. This will be uncomfortable. Your thinking zone will tell you this is dangerous, inefficient, or pointless. That resistance is part of the process, not evidence that something is wrong. What changes everything is direct experience. You can read about these 3 zones and understand them conceptually, but that understanding lives in your thinking zone. The actual shift happens when you feel the difference in your body. When you notice that dropping out of analysis and into sensation creates immediate relief. When you discover that speaking from your feeling zone instead of your thinking zone produces completely different responses in people around you. When you have an experience of genuine connection that didn't require any mental preparation or rehearsal. Those moments teach you something your analytical mind can't learn from description alone. This first chapter gives you the map. You now understand that there are 3 distinct zones of experience, that you've been living almost exclusively in one of them, and that the other 2 zones are where intimacy actually exists. You know why your brain defaults to thinking, and what that pattern is costing you. You have language for something you've been experiencing without being able to name it. The rest of this book teaches you how to move through this map, how to develop genuine skill in the zones you've been avoiding, and how to access connection without having to think your way there. The framework is simple, but simple doesn't mean easy. You're reconditioning neural pathways that have been operating the same way for years or decades. You're learning to trust parts of yourself that have been dormant or suppressed. You're developing skills that might feel awkward or unnatural at first. All of that is expected. What makes this possible is that the capacity for feeling and connecting isn't something you need to create from scratch. It's already there, underneath the thinking. You're not learning something foreign. You're remembering something you knew before your analytical mind became your dominant mode of operating. The Think, Feel, Connect framework will show up in every chapter going forward. Each new skill you learn will reference back to these three zones and help you move between them with increasing fluidity. You'll develop practices that interrupt the automatic jump to thinking. You'll learn to recognize the physical signature of each zone so you can tell where you are at any given moment. You'll discover what keeps you stuck in thinking and what helps you drop into feeling. You'll practice staying in the connecting zone even when your impulse is to retreat into analysis. Your relationship with yourself is about to change in fundamental ways. The person who finishes this book won't be the same person who started it. You'll have access to parts of your experience that currently feel either overwhelming or non-existent. You'll be able to sit with emotions without needing to immediately figure them out. You'll be able to connect with people from a place of genuine presence instead of performed understanding. That version of you isn't somewhere in the distant future. It emerges through the accumulation of small shifts that begin right now, with understanding that there are three zones, and you've been stuck in one of them. Chapter 2. Somatic Anchoring for Mental Quiet. Your chest is doing something right now. Before you started reading this sentence, before you even picked up this book today, your chest was already in a particular state. There's a certain amount of space or tightness there, a quality of openness or constriction. Temperature. Wait. You haven't been paying attention to it, but it's been there the whole time, communicating information you've been ignoring. This chapter teaches you how to interrupt the thinking zone by redirecting your attention to physical sensation. The practices you'll learn work because they give your overactive analytical mind something specific to do that isn't analysis. Your brain can't simultaneously track detailed body sensations and run its usual mental loops. These two activities use overlapping neural resources, which means engaging deeply with physical awareness creates genuine mental quiet, rather than just suppressing thoughts. The difference matters. Most techniques for quieting the mind try to stop thoughts directly, which doesn't work for overthinkers. Telling yourself not to think creates more thinking about not thinking. Trying to empty your mind gives your analytical brain a new project to manage. What does work is occupying your attention so completely with sensation that thoughts lose their grip naturally. They don't disappear, but they fade into the background instead of dominating your awareness. Your body is already speaking a language you've forgotten how to hear. Every emotion you have creates a physical signature before your thinking zone turns it into a narrative. Anxiety lives in your chest and throat before it becomes thoughts about what might go wrong. Sadness shows up as heaviness in your limbs and behind your eyes before it becomes a story about what you've lost. Anger creates heat and tension in your jaw and shoulders before it becomes thoughts about what's unfair. You experience these sensations for a split second before your analytical mind grabs them and starts working on them. Somatic anchoring means learning to catch those sensations before the thinking zone intercepts them. You develop the ability to notice what's happening in your body and stay there, feeling it directly instead of immediately jumping to interpretation. This skill forms the foundation for everything else in this book, because you can't access the feeling zone if you can't stay present with physical sensation. You can't speak from genuine emotion if you're not in touch with where that emotion lives in your body. You can't connect authentically if you're always one layer removed from your direct experience. The basic practice starts with location. Your attention right now is probably centered in your head, somewhere behind your eyes, or at the top of your skull. That's where overthinkers live most of the time. The physical sensation of being in your head has specific qualities. There's a sense of separation from your body, like your mind is the real you and your body is just the vehicle carrying it around. Your thoughts feel loud and immediate, while physical sensations feel distant or muted. You might be vaguely aware that you have a body, but it's background information rather than primary experience. Dropping your attention from your head into your body is a learnable skill, not a mystical experience. You're going to practice moving your awareness from where it usually lives to somewhere else entirely. The easiest place to start is your chest, specifically the area right in the center of your ribcage. Put your hand there right now. Feel the pressure of your palm against your sternum, the warmth of your skin through your shirt, the slight movement that happens with each breath. That contact between your hand and your chest creates a focal point for your attention. Your brain receives signals from the touch receptors in your palm and from the pressure sensors in your chest wall. These signals compete with your thoughts for neural bandwidth. When you focus on tracking those sensations in detail, your thinking zone has less capacity to run its usual programs. Your analytical mind might still be generating thoughts in the background, but they're quieter because some of its resources are occupied with processing sensory information. Keep your hand there. Notice whether the area under your palm feels tight or loose. Is there a sense of space inside your chest, or does it feel compressed? Can you detect any temperature, any pulsing or vibrating, any areas that feel more numb or more sensitive than others? These aren't rhetorical questions. You're training your attention to pick up details it usually ignores. Your brain registers this information constantly, but you've been filtering it out to focus on thoughts. Right now, you're reversing that filter. Your breathing changes the moment you pay attention to it. That's normal and doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. Overthinkers often try to control their breath the second they notice it, which creates a different kind of tension. Let your breathing be whatever it is. Maybe it's shallow and rapid. Maybe it's deep and slow. Maybe it's irregular. You're not trying to change it. You're trying to feel it. Notice where the movement happens. Your chest probably rises and falls, but what else moves? Does your belly expand? Do your shoulders shift? Can you feel air moving through your nostrils or your throat? This detailed tracking of breath and sensation interrupts the thinking zone because it requires sustained attention on something that isn't a thought. Your analytical mind might try to turn this into a thought exercise by asking questions like, "Am I doing this right?" or making observations like, "This is interesting," or planning what you'll do next. Those are all thinking zone activities. Each time you notice you've drifted into analysis, you haven't failed. You've just completed the most important part of the practice, which is recognizing when you're in your head instead of in your body. The return from thinking to sensing is where the actual skill develops. You'll drift into thoughts dozens of times during any practice session. What matters is that you notice when it happens and redirect your attention back to sensation. This isn't a battle against thinking. You're not trying to force thoughts away or judge yourself for having them. You're simply practicing the skill of noticing where your attention is and choosing to move it somewhere else. Here's what makes this different from meditation or mindfulness practices you might have tried before. You're not aiming for a blank mind or a peaceful state. You're building a specific capacity, the ability to shift your attention from mental content to physical sensation on demand. You need this capacity because the moments when you most need to get out of your head are the moments when your thinking is loudest. When you're spinning in anxiety about how someone will respond to what you need to say, or when you're stuck in analysis about what their behavior means, or when you're rehearsing a conversation for the 100th time, those are the moments when accessing your body becomes essential. The practices need to work in real time, during actual stress, not just during dedicated quiet time. This means you learn them in relatively calm moments, so they're available when things get intense. Right now, sitting with this book, you probably don't feel acute emotional distress. This is the perfect time to practice because your nervous system isn't flooded and your thinking zone isn't in overdrive. You're building the neural pathway in conditions that make it easier to focus. Try expanding your awareness beyond your chest. Keep some attention on the area under your hand, but let your awareness widen to include your whole torso. Can you sense your belly, your lower back, your pelvis? Most people discover they have almost no awareness of these areas. Your attention has been living in your head for so long that the rest of your body might feel like a vague, undifferentiated mass. That's common and changeable. The more you practice directing attention to specific body parts, the more sensation becomes available there. Your belly holds tremendous emotional information that your thinking zone usually overrides. Strong feelings live in your gut before they move up into your chest and throat. When something feels wrong, but you can't explain why, that knowing comes from your belly. When you meet someone and immediately sense whether they're trustworthy, your gut already knows before your mind has processed any evidence. Overthinkers have learned to dismiss this information as irrational or unreliable. You've been trained to trust analysis over instinct, which means you've been ignoring signals from the part of your body that's most tuned to emotional truth. Place your other hand on your belly, below your navel. You now have both hands on your body, creating 2 points of contact and 2 sources of sensory information. Your brain is processing signals from your palms, from your chest and belly, from the slight movement that happens with breathing. This divided attention makes it even harder for your thinking zone to dominate. You can't run elaborate mental stories while simultaneously tracking multiple streams of detailed physical sensation. What do you notice in your belly? The same questions apply here. Tight or loose? Warm or cool? Still or moving? You might detect some gurgling or churning if your digestive system is active. You might feel nothing at all, which tells you that your awareness hasn't reached this area in a long time. Numbness or absence of sensation isn't a problem. It's information. You're discovering which parts of your body you've been disconnected from. The hands-on body technique works because it's concrete and impossible to do wrong. You can't place your hand on your chest incorrectly. You can't fail at noticing whatever sensations are there. Your thinking zone might try to grade your performance or compare this experience to what it should feel like. But the practice itself is completely straightforward. Hand goes on body. Attention follows. Sensations arise or don't arise. That's the whole thing. This becomes your emergency interrupt when you catch yourself spiraling. You're lying in bed at 2 a.m, replaying a conversation from earlier, analyzing what you said and what they might have thought and what it means about everything. Your chest is tight. Your thoughts are loud. You feel completely stuck in your head. This is the moment when you put your hand on your chest and redirect your attention to what's happening under your palm. The thoughts don't stop immediately, but you're no longer feeding them all your attention. Some of your neural bandwidth is now occupied with tracking physical sensation instead. The practice works because it's a pattern interrupt that doesn't require your thinking zone to cooperate. You can't think your way out of overthinking. You've already proven that to yourself thousands of times. What you can do is shift the spotlight of your attention from mental content to physical sensation, which naturally quiets the mind because attention is a limited resource. Your brain can't fully invest in both activities simultaneously. Different parts of your body serve different functions when you're working with overwhelming emotion. Your chest and belly are where you feel emotion most directly. Your throat is where emotion gets stuck when you're suppressing it. Your jaw and shoulders hold tension that comes from bracing against feelings you don't want to experience. Your hands and feet can ground you when emotion feels too big or too intense. Learning to recognize what's happening in each area gives you more options for working with your experience. Your throat tightens when you're holding back emotion that wants to come out. This happens whether you're aware of it or not. You might be in a conversation where you want to say something vulnerable, but don't, and your throat will constrict in response to the suppression. You might be feeling sad but believe you shouldn't cry, and the tears get trapped in your throat, creating that familiar ache. You might be angry, but think expressing it would be inappropriate, and the energy that wants to come out as words gets locked behind your vocal cords. Put your hand on your throat now. Not squeezing, just resting your fingers gently against the front of your neck. What do you notice? Is there tightness or openness? Can you feel your pulse? What happens to this area when you swallow? Your throat is incredibly sensitive and usually holds a lot of unexpressed emotion. Most overthinkers have chronic tension here, because they're constantly monitoring what they say, filtering their responses, and suppressing spontaneous reactions. The tension in your throat isn't something to fix or release. You're learning to notice it, to be aware of what's happening in this area. The awareness itself changes things over time. When you can feel how your throat constricts in response to suppression, you start to recognize the suppression as it's happening, rather than only realizing it after the fact. That real-time awareness is what eventually allows you to make different choices. Your jaw clenches when you're bracing against experience. This is usually unconscious. You're stressed about something, and without noticing, you've been grinding your teeth or holding your jaw tight for hours. You're in a difficult conversation, and your jaw locks up as a physical manifestation of the control you're trying to maintain. You're anxious about the future, and your jaw tightens as if preparing for impact. Place your fingers on your jaw joints, right where your lower jaw meets your skull in front of your ears. Open and close your mouth slowly while keeping your fingers there. Can you feel the movement? Now keep your mouth closed and notice whether there's any tension in your jaw. Are your teeth touching? Most people keep their teeth clenched slightly without realizing it. The natural resting position has a small gap between your top and bottom teeth, but chronic tension eliminates that gap. Let your jaw hang loose. Don't force it. Just stop holding it in any particular position. Your mouth might open slightly. Your tongue might settle differently in your mouth. This tiny release creates a cascade effect through your whole body because jaw tension is connected to tension everywhere else. Your shoulders often relax when your jaw relaxes. Your breathing deepens. Your thoughts quiet slightly. Your shoulders carry the weight of trying to hold everything together. When you're overwhelmed, your shoulders rise toward your ears. When you're feeling protective or defensive, they round forward. When you're trying to appear confident while feeling uncertain, they pull back rigidly. All of this happens below your conscious awareness until you specifically direct attention there. Roll your shoulders back a few times right now. Then roll them forward. Then let them settle wherever they want to be without trying to position them correctly. Notice whether your right shoulder and left shoulder feel the same or different. Is there more tension on your dominant side? Can you feel the weight of your arms hanging from your shoulder sockets? What happens to your shoulders when you take a deep breath? These body scans aren't about achieving a particular state. You're not trying to relax or release tension, even though that might happen. You're developing the skill of directing attention to different areas and noticing what's there. This skill becomes essential when you need to identify where emotion is showing up in your body, so you can stay with it instead of jumping immediately into your head. Emotion has different physical signatures depending on what you're feeling. Anxiety usually shows up as tightness in your chest, tension in your shoulders, and a fluttery or churning sensation in your belly. Your heart might race. Your breathing might get shallow. Your hands might feel cold or tingly. Sadness often creates heaviness in your chest and limbs, an ache in your throat, and pressure behind your eyes. Your body might feel tired or slow. Your breathing might become irregular or include spontaneous sighs. Anger generates heat, usually in your chest, face, and hands. Your jaw might clench. Your fists might tighten. Your heart rate increases. There's often a sense of energy or pressure that wants to move outward. Shame creates a feeling of wanting to disappear or hide. Your shoulders might round forward. Your gaze might drop. Your face might feel hot. There's often a sense of collapse or compression in your chest. These descriptions are generalizations. Your personal physical signatures might be different. The practice is learning to recognize your specific patterns by paying attention during emotional moments, instead of immediately jumping into analysis. When you notice you're feeling anxious, that's your cue to drop your attention into your body and track what's actually happening there. Where do you feel it? What are the specific sensations? How intense are they? Are they moving or static? This seems simple until you try it during actual emotional activation. Your thinking zone will resist because staying with uncomfortable sensation feels threatening. Your mind wants to solve the problem, figure out what's wrong, Plan how to fix it. Dropping into your body and just feeling what's there seems like it's not doing anything productive. This is where most overthinkers abandon the practice. They try it once or twice, don't see immediate results, and go back to analysis because at least thinking feels like action. The actual shift happens through repetition over time. Each time you catch yourself in the thinking zone and redirect to physical sensation, you're weakening the automatic pathway and strengthening a new one. Each time you notice where emotion lives in your body instead of immediately turning it into thoughts, you're building capacity in the feeling zone. This is cumulative. You won't feel dramatically different after doing it once. But after doing it hundreds of times over weeks and months, your default mode starts to change. Your hands and feet ground you when emotion feels overwhelming. This is particularly useful during acute anxiety, or when you feel like you're spinning out of control. Your extremities are far from your torso, which means directing attention there creates distance from the intense sensations in your chest and belly. You're not avoiding those feelings. You're giving yourself a stable base while you work with them. Press your feet firmly into the floor right now. If you're sitting, stand up. If you're lying down, sit up. Feel the contact between the soles of your feet and whatever surface they're on. Rock forward and back slightly. Shift your weight from your heels to the balls of your feet and back again. This physical connection with the ground reminds your nervous system that you're safe and stable right now, even if your emotions feel chaotic. Press your palms together in front of your chest. Push hard enough that you feel the pressure and the engagement of your arm muscles. Hold that pressure for 10 seconds. This creates strong sensory input that captures your attention and interrupts the thinking spiral. Your brain has to process the signals from your hands and arms, which gives it less bandwidth for racing thoughts. Movement interrupts thinking even more effectively than stillness. Your analytical mind can keep running while you sit quietly, but it has a harder time maintaining elaborate thought patterns when your body is moving. This doesn't mean you need to exercise or dance around your living room, though those can work. Small, simple movements done with full attention create the same effect. Stretch your arms overhead right now. Interlace your fingers and press your palms toward the ceiling. Feel the stretch through your sides and back. Notice what happens to your breathing. Hold this for 5 breaths, then release. That movement forced your attention into your body because stretching creates sensations you can't ignore. Your mind might have still been generating thoughts, but they were competing with physical feedback for your attention. Shake your hands vigorously for 10 seconds. Just let them flop around loosely at the ends of your wrists. This looks silly and feels silly, which is actually useful because it interrupts the seriousness your thinking zone brings to everything. The movement discharges nervous energy that's been building up and gives your attention something immediate and physical to track. Walk slowly around your space if you're able to right now. Notice how your weight shifts from foot to foot. Feel your legs moving, your arms swinging, your head balancing on top of your spine. This is walking meditation without the meditation label. You're simply paying close attention to the physical experience of moving through space. Your thinking zone will try to keep running its programs, but movement naturally quiets it because your brain has to coordinate the physical activity. The combination of touch, attention, and movement becomes your toolkit for getting out of your head during moments of emotional intensity. You don't need to do all of these things at once. You pick whichever practice matches the moment. If you're in bed ruminating, hands-on body works because it's quiet and private. If you're about to have a difficult conversation and feel anxiety rising, grounding through your feet while you take a few deep breaths helps you center before speaking. If you've just finished a stressful interaction and need to discharge the energy, shaking or walking or stretching gives that energy somewhere to go. The practices need to become automatic. which means you do them often enough that they're available when you need them. This requires building them into your daily routine in small ways. When you wake up in the morning, before you pick up your phone or start planning your day, spend 30 seconds with your hand on your chest, noticing your breathing. When you're waiting for coffee to brew or water to boil, put both hands on your belly and track the sensations there. When you're standing in line or sitting in traffic, press your feet into the floor and feel the contact. These micro practices throughout your day create neural pathways that make the skill accessible during stress. You're not trying to add a huge new time commitment to your life. You're taking moments that already exist, transitions between activities, waiting periods, moments of boredom, and using them to practice shifting your attention from thinking to sensing. 30 seconds here, a minute there, a few breaths in between tasks. This adds up to significant practice time without requiring you to carve out dedicated sessions. Your thinking zone will tell you this isn't enough or isn't serious enough to make a difference. That's the analytical mind doing what it does, which is evaluating and judging. The actual evidence comes from direct experience. After doing these micro practices consistently for a few weeks, you'll notice that dropping into your body becomes easier. The pathway strengthens. What used to take conscious effort starts to happen more naturally. You catch yourself spiraling in thoughts and can interrupt it more quickly because your attention knows how to shift. The goal isn't to eliminate thinking or to spend all your time focused on sensation. You're developing flexibility. Right now you're stuck in the thinking zone almost all the time. These practices teach you how to access the feeling zone when you need it. You're building a skill that doesn't exist yet, which means it will feel awkward and effortful at first. That's true for any new ability. You practice when it's hard until it becomes easier, and then it's available to you when it matters most. Physical sensation is the doorway to genuine emotion. Your feelings exist in your body before your mind creates narratives about them. When you develop the capacity to stay present with sensation, instead of immediately analyzing it, you gain access to emotional information you've been missing. You can feel what you actually want instead of what you think you should want. You can recognize when you're uncomfortable in a situation before your mind rationalizes it away. You can express what's happening for you in real time, instead of only figuring it out later through analysis. This chapter gives you concrete practices that work through repetition. Hand on chest. Hand on belly. Attention on breathing. Notice tension in your throat, your jaw, your shoulders. Ground through your feet and hands. Move your body with attention. Each practice interrupts the automatic jump to thinking and redirects you toward direct physical experience. That redirection is how you build capacity in the feeling zone, which is essential for everything that comes next. You can't connect authentically without accessing genuine emotion. And you can't access genuine emotion while you're stuck in your head. Chapter 3. Expression without rehearsal. You've spent 3 hours mentally preparing what you're going to say. You've crafted the perfect opening. You've anticipated their possible responses and planned your replies to each scenario. You've revised your wording to make it softer, clearer, more precise. You've imagined the conversation going well and imagined it going badly. When the actual moment arrives and you start speaking, your carefully prepared words come out sounding stiff and disconnected. They don't land the way you hoped. The other person seems confused or defensive. And you can feel the gap between what you wanted to communicate and what's actually happening. The problem isn't that you prepared poorly. The problem is that you prepared at all. Rehearsal creates a script, and scripts come from your thinking zone rather than your feeling zone. When you speak from a script, you're sharing your analysis of your feelings instead of your actual feelings. The other person can sense this difference, even if they can't articulate what feels off. They're receiving your thoughts about your experience instead of your experience itself, which prevents genuine connection. This chapter teaches you how to speak from your direct emotional experience, rather than from mental preparation. You'll learn to recognize when you're about to over-explain, how to interrupt yourself mid-justification, and how to share what you're feeling right now instead of what you've concluded about the situation. These skills feel risky because they require you to speak without knowing exactly what's going to come out. Your thinking zone will resist this intensely because spontaneous expression means giving up control. The habit of rehearsal developed for valid reasons. Speaking from unfiltered emotion probably got you in trouble when you were younger. Maybe you expressed feelings and got punished or dismissed. Maybe the adults around you responded better to logical explanations than emotional ones. Maybe you learned that your raw feelings were too much for people to handle, so you started processing them into more palatable forms before sharing. Your analytical mind learned to protect you by filtering everything through thinking before it came out of your mouth. That protection worked in certain contexts, but now costs you intimacy. When you filter everything through analysis before expressing it, you remove the emotional energy that creates connection. The other person receives information about your feelings, but they don't feel your feelings. They get your interpretation and explanation, but they don't get you. This is why you can have long conversations about important topics and still feel disconnected afterward. You shared extensively, but not authentically. Authentic expression comes from the feeling zone, while rehearsed expression comes from the thinking zone. The difference shows up in how your words are generated. When you're speaking from rehearsal, you're pulling pre-formed sentences from memory. You know what you want to say before you say it. You might even be reading from an internal script. Your attention is split between monitoring the other person's reactions and making sure you say everything you plan to say. Your body feels tight or controlled. Your voice might sound slightly monotone or overly careful. Speaking from your feeling zone feels completely different. The words emerge in real time as you're tracking what's happening in your body. You don't know what you're going to say until you're saying it. Your attention is mostly on your internal experience, with some awareness of the other person. Your body feels more alive and less controlled. Your voice has natural variation and might even crack or shake if the emotion is strong. This unplanned quality is exactly what creates connection because the other person can tell you're sharing something real and present. Your thinking zone fears this spontaneity because it can't guarantee the outcome. What if you say the wrong thing? What if you cry? What if they react badly? What if you hurt their feelings? What if you sound stupid? These questions feel important and worth addressing through preparation, but they actually keep you stuck. The need to control every word before it comes out is the same pattern that prevents you from feeling connected. You're choosing safety over intimacy, and then wondering why intimacy feels so elusive. The shift starts with recognizing when you're about to over-explain. You say something vulnerable and immediately follow it with justification or context or explanation. This happens automatically. You tell someone, "I felt hurt when you said that," and before they can respond, you're adding, "And I know you probably didn't mean it that way, and I might be too sensitive, but I just wanted you to know." That addition comes from your thinking zone trying to soften or manage what you just expressed from your feeling zone. The impulse to add more happens because your first statement felt too raw or too much. Your analytical mind jumped in to protect you by qualifying what you said, providing explanations, and giving the other person exits. This seems helpful, but actually muddles your communication. Your original statement was clear and direct. Everything you added after that diluted it and shifted the conversation from your feelings to your thoughts about your feelings. Catch the impulse before you act on it. You feel the urge to keep talking, to explain further, to make sure they understand. That urge is your thinking zone activating. What happens if you just sit with that urge without acting on it? Your chest might tighten. Your throat might feel uncomfortable. You might feel exposed or vulnerable. Those sensations are exactly why your mind wants to jump back and it's trying to relieve the discomfort. But that discomfort is actually the space where connection can happen. Silence after a vulnerable statement feels excruciating for overthinkers. You've just said something real, and now there's a gap, and your mind wants to fill that gap with more words. This is where most people sabotage their own expression. They say something genuine, and then talk themselves out of it or around it before the other person can even absorb it. The silence isn't a problem to solve. The silence is the other person having their response, and that response needs space to form. Practice stopping after your initial statement. This feels impossible at first because the urge to continue is so strong. You say, "I need more consistency from you," and then you have to physically stop yourself from adding, I know you're busy and I don't want to be demanding, but it would really help me if we could." All of that addition is thinking zone material that weakens your original expression. Your need for consistency is valid and clear. Everything else is your anxiety about having stated it. Your body will tell you when you're about to over-explain. There's a specific physical sensation that comes right before you add unnecessary words. For most people, it's a tightness in the chest or throat, a slight holding of breath, or a sense of urgency. Learning to recognize this sensation gives you a chance to pause instead of automatically continuing. You feel that tightness and you know, this is the moment where I usually start explaining. What happens if I don't? Different people have different over-explanation patterns. Some people add excessive context before getting to the main point. They spend 5 minutes providing background information and explaining the situation before they say what they actually need to say. This comes from the belief that the other person needs all that context to understand. But usually the context is for you, not them. You're trying to justify your feelings to yourself by proving they're logical before you express them. Some people add disclaimers and qualifications that weaken their statement. "I might be wrong about this, but," or "this is probably just me, but," or "I don't want to make a big deal out of this, but." All of these phrases tell the other person that what you're about to say isn't important or might not be valid. You're preemptively dismissing yourself before they have a chance to take you seriously. Some people pivot to questions instead of staying with their statement. They express something vulnerable and then immediately ask, "Does that make sense?" Or, "Do you understand what I mean?" Or, "What do you think?" This shifts the focus from your experience to their response before they've had time to absorb what you said. The question is a way of checking whether you're safe, but it interrupts the natural flow of them receiving your expression. Speaking from your felt experience means tracking what's happening in your body as you talk. You're not pulling from pre-written scripts. You're noticing sensation and putting words to it in real time. This requires access to the feeling zone, which is why the somatic practices from the previous chapter matter so much. If you can't feel what's happening in your body, you can't speak from that place. You default back to speaking from your thoughts, because that's the only information available to you. Try this right now. Put your hand on your chest. Notice what you feel there. Don't analyze it or interpret it, just notice the raw sensation. Now say out loud, "I'm noticing," and describe the sensation you're feeling. "I'm noticing tightness in my chest," or "I'm noticing heaviness behind my eyes," or "I'm noticing a flutter in my belly." You just spoke from your feeling zone. The words came from your direct experience rather than from thinking about your experience. That same process applies to emotional conversations. Instead of planning what you'll say, you track what you're feeling in your body during the conversation and speak from that. The other person says something that bothers you. You notice heat in your face and tension in your jaw. Instead of thinking about why you're bothered and constructing a response, you say, "I'm noticing I feel defensive right now," or "Something about what you just said made my chest get tight." These statements feel too simple or too obvious to be useful. Your thinking zone wants to provide more information, more explanation, more context. But simple and direct is what creates connection. The other person receives clear information about your experience without having to parse through layers of analysis. They can respond to what you're actually feeling instead of what you think about what you're feeling. The language changes when you speak from sensation instead of interpretation. Interpretation sounds like, "You made me feel bad when you said that." Sensation sounds like, "When you said that, my stomach dropped." Interpretation sounds like, "I think you're being dismissive." Sensation sounds like, "I feel a tightness in my chest when you respond that way." The sensation-based language is less accusatory and more vulnerable. You're sharing your experience without making claims about their intentions. This distinction matters because interpretation triggers defensiveness, while sensation invites curiosity. When you tell someone what they did or what they meant, they often feel the need to defend themselves or explain what they actually meant. When you share your physical experience, there's nothing to defend against. You felt what you felt. They might not have intended to create that feeling, but they can't deny that you had it. This opens space for them to get curious about your experience rather than protective of their intentions. Your thinking zone will insist that sensation-based language isn't specific enough. You haven't explained what they did wrong or what you need them to do differently. This is true. Sensation-based language shares your experience without demands or solutions. That feels incomplete to your analytical mind. But it's actually more effective because it keeps you in the feeling zone and invites the other person to connect with your experience, rather than fix a problem. Problems and solutions come from the thinking zone. Connection happens in the feeling zone. When you immediately jump to what needs to change or what they should do differently, you've left the feeling zone before the connection could form. The other person shifts into problem-solving mode instead of empathy mode. You both end up in your thinking zones discussing logistics instead of being present with emotion. Staying with sensation allows the conversation to remain in the connecting zone. You share what you're feeling. They respond to that. You track your response to their response and share that. This back and forth happens at the level of direct experience rather than interpretation. Both people are tracking what's happening inside them and sharing it without moving into analysis or problem solving. This is what intimacy actually feels like, being present with emotion together without needing to fix or explain it. Your voice carries different qualities depending on which zone you're speaking from. When you're in your thinking zone, your voice tends to be more monotone or controlled. You're managing what comes out, which creates a flatness in your tone. When you're speaking from your feeling zone, your voice has more variation. It might crack or shake. It might get louder or softer naturally. It might speed up or slow down based on what you're feeling. This variation is authentic expression, not a problem to control. Most overthinkers have been suppressing vocal variation for years. You've learned to keep your voice steady because showing emotion feels dangerous or unprofessional or too much. This control requires constant effort and removes information that helps people connect with you. The shakiness in your voice when you're scared or hurt tells the other person something important. The anger that comes through in your tone communicates intensity that words alone don't convey. When you flatten your voice to sound more composed, you're removing the emotional content that creates connection. Letting your voice be uncontrolled feels terrifying. What if you cry? What if your voice breaks? What if they can tell you're upset? All of these fears assume that showing emotion is a weakness or will cause negative consequences. The opposite is usually true. When people hear genuine emotion in your voice, they're more likely to take you seriously and respond with care. The flatness and control is what creates distance and makes them less able to connect with what you're saying. Practice speaking from sensation when the stakes are low. You're talking to a friend about something minor. Instead of your usual filtered response, notice what you feel in your body and speak from that. "I'm feeling excited about this," or "I notice I feel resistance when you suggest that," or "Something about this conversation is making me feel warm and relaxed." You're not sharing deep, vulnerable content, but you're practicing the skill of tracking sensation and putting it into words immediately without filtering through analysis. Different emotions require different approaches to unfiltered expression. Anger wants to come out with force and volume. Your thinking zone usually intercepts this and translates it into controlled statements or passive-aggressive comments. When you speak anger from your feeling zone, you might sound loud or intense. This scares overthinkers because it feels like losing control. But expressing anger cleanly and directly is healthier than suppressing it or leaking it out sideways through sarcasm or withdrawal. Sadness wants to come out with tears or a drop in energy. Your thinking zone usually prevents this by keeping you busy or redirecting to analysis. When you speak sadness from your feeling zone, your voice might crack or you might cry. This feels exposing and vulnerable, which is why you've been avoiding it. But sharing sadness directly allows people to meet you with comfort or empathy, while hiding it leaves you isolated with your pain. Fear wants to make you small and careful. Your thinking zone accommodates this by having you qualify everything and check constantly whether you're safe. When you speak fear from your feeling zone, you might sound shaky or uncertain. This honesty about your fear is actually more connecting than pretending confidence you don't feel. People respond better to genuine uncertainty than to false certainty. Joy wants to expand and express freely. Your thinking zone often dampens this because showing too much positive emotion feels vulnerable in a different way. When you speak joy from your feeling zone, you might sound enthusiastic or animated. Overthinkers often suppress this natural expressiveness because it feels like too much or might make others uncomfortable. Letting your joy be unfiltered makes you more alive and gives others permission to access their own joy. The mid-conversation pause is where most progress happens. You're talking, and you notice yourself starting to over-explain or justify. You feel the urge to add more words. Instead of following that urge, you pause. Just stop speaking mid-sentence if you need to. This pause creates space for you to check in with what's happening in your body. Are you still in your feeling zone, or have you jumped back into thinking? Can you feel the sensation that's driving what you want to say? Or are you speaking from mental content? That pause might feel awkward or abrupt. The other person might look at you expectantly, waiting for you to finish. You can say, "Give me a second, I'm noticing something," or "I need a moment to feel what I want to say." This names what's happening and gives you permission to take the time you need. Most people respond well to this honesty because it's so much more real than the usual polished communication. During the pause, you drop your attention back into your body. Hand on chest if that helps. Notice what sensation is present. Let words arise from that sensation, rather than from your thoughts about the situation. This might mean you say something completely different than what you were planning to say. The thinking zone had a script about being reasonable and balanced. The feeling zone has a different truth that's simpler and more direct. You speak from what you feel rather than what you think you should say. Your body knows what's true before your mind has figured out how to say it. When you speak from that bodily knowing, your words have a different quality. They're more economical because you're not adding layers of justification. They're more powerful because they carry authentic emotion. They're more connecting because the other person receives your actual experience rather than your narrative about it. This is what people mean when they talk about speaking your truth. You're expressing what's real for you in the moment, rather than what you think you should express. The practice asks you to tolerate uncertainty and discomfort. You don't know what you're going to say until you say it. You can't control how your words will land. You might say something that makes you feel exposed. You might express emotion more intensely than feels comfortable. All of this happens when you speak from the feeling zone instead of the thinking zone. The discomfort is the cost of authentic expression. And it's also proof that you're doing something different than your usual pattern. Expression without rehearsal doesn't mean you never think about what you want to communicate. You might have a general sense that you need to discuss something difficult. You might know that you have feelings about a situation that need to be shared. That awareness is fine and useful. The rehearsal that causes problems is when you script out the exact words, practice how you'll say them, and plan for every possible response. That level of preparation pulls you completely into the thinking zone and makes speaking from feeling impossible. Going into an important conversation, you can prepare by checking in with your body. What are you actually feeling about this situation? Where do you feel it physically? What sensations are present? This body-based preparation keeps you connected to the feeling zone rather than pulling you into mental rehearsal. You're getting clear on your direct experience rather than constructing the perfect explanation of your experience. When the conversation begins, you might start with something simple from your felt sense. I'm noticing I feel nervous talking about this, or my chest is tight right now, or I'm feeling some resistance to this conversation. This grounds you in the feeling zone from the beginning. You're not starting with your rehearsed opening statement. You're starting with what's true right now. This sets a different tone and makes it easier to stay present rather than performing your script. Speaking from the feeling zone doesn't mean every conversation needs to be emotionally intense or deeply vulnerable. Sometimes you're sharing something relatively neutral, but you're still speaking from sensation rather than interpretation. I'm noticing I feel energized when we talk about this option, or something about that plan makes my belly feel uneasy, or I feel a sense of relief when you say that. These statements are simple and grounded in direct experience without being dramatic or overwhelming. The skill applies to all kinds of communication, not just difficult or vulnerable conversations. You can speak from your feeling zone when you're expressing appreciation, when you're making plans, when you're discussing preferences, when you're sharing your day. The practice is the same. Track sensation. Let words arise from that sensation. Resist the urge to over-explain or justify. This creates a different quality in all your interactions, making even mundane conversations feel more alive and connecting. What develops over time is a trust in your unfiltered expression. Right now you believe that your raw feelings are too much or not enough, that they need to be processed and packaged before they're acceptable to share. This belief keeps you locked in the thinking zone, endlessly preparing and rehearsing. Through repeated experience of speaking from sensation and having it received, you start to trust that your direct expression is actually more effective than your managed expression. The very thing you were afraid of being unfiltered turns out to be what creates the connection you've been seeking. Chapter 4. Building your personal regulation system. A regulation system isn't a rigid routine you force yourself to follow. Your thinking zone loves the idea of a perfect schedule with dedicated practice times and measurable progress markers. That approach works for some things but fails for this, because it treats regulation as a task to complete rather than a capacity to develop. What you need instead is a collection of micro-practices woven into your existing life that keep you checking in with your body throughout the day. You're building a baseline of body awareness that makes the feeling zone accessible before you desperately need it. Most people wait until they're flooded with emotion before they try to regulate. You're panicking about a conversation that's happening tomorrow, so you put your hand on your chest and try to calm down. You're spinning in rumination at midnight, so you attempt to redirect your attention to sensation. This is like trying to learn to swim while drowning. The skills work better when you practice them in calm water first, building strength and familiarity that you can draw on when the current gets rough. Your day already contains dozens of natural transition points where micro-practices fit seamlessly. The moment you wake up before you reach for your phone. The time between turning off your alarm and getting out of bed. Waiting for the shower to heat up. Standing at the counter while coffee brews. Sitting in your car before turning the key. Walking from your car to a building. Waiting for your computer to start. These moments already exist, and you're already experiencing them, but you're probably spending them in your thinking zone planning ahead or reviewing the past. Take the morning transition from sleep to waking. Most overthinkers wake up and immediately start thinking about everything they need to do. Your eyes open, and within seconds your mind is making lists, anticipating problems, reviewing yesterday's interactions. This sets the tone for your entire day, starting in the thinking zone and staying there until you collapse at night. What happens if you interrupt that pattern right at the beginning? The alarm goes off, or you naturally wake up. Before you do anything else, put your hand on your chest. Just place it there and feel your breathing. Your mind will immediately try to start planning, and you'll notice the pull toward thinking. That pull is information. You're learning exactly how strong the habit is and how early it activates. Don't fight it or judge it. Just notice it while keeping some attention on your hand and your breath. 30 seconds. That's all this takes. You've started your day from your body instead of from your head. This small shift accumulates. You do it most mornings, and your nervous system learns that mornings don't have to begin with mental activation. The pattern of waking up in thinking mode gets interrupted often enough that it stops being completely automatic. You start having mornings where you naturally feel your body before your mind revs up. This is the accumulation effect, not dramatic daily changes, but small consistent interruptions that add up to a different baseline over weeks and months. The shower offers another natural opportunity. Hot water on your skin creates strong sensation that can anchor your attention in your body. Most people shower while thinking about their day or replaying conversations or solving problems. The physical experience of showering happens in the background, while the thinking zone runs at full speed. You can transform this daily necessity into a regulation practice without adding any time or effort. Feel the water hitting your scalp and running down your back. Notice the temperature. Track the sensation of soap on your skin. Feel your feet on the shower floor. When your mind wanders to planning or analyzing, which it will, constantly redirect your attention back to the physical sensations of showering. You're not trying to stop thoughts. You're practicing the redirect, the skill of noticing you're in thinking mode and choosing to return to sensation. You do this every single day, which means you get daily practice with the exact skill you need most. Waiting creates dozens of micro-practice opportunities throughout your day. Waiting for coffee, waiting for a website to load, waiting for someone to respond to your message, waiting in line, waiting at a red light. These moments usually get filled with phone scrolling or mental spinning. Your thinking zone treats any empty moment as an invitation to start working on something. What if these moments became cues to check in with your body instead? You're waiting for coffee to brew. Put both hands on your belly. Feel your breathing moving your hands slightly. Notice any tension in your shoulders. Feel your feet on the floor. This takes the same amount of time that scrolling your phone would take, but it serves a completely different function. You're reconnecting with your body multiple times throughout the day instead of staying in your head constantly. These micro reconnections keep the pathway between thinking and feeling active, so it's there when you need it. Your environment can be designed to remind you to check in. Most people's environments are set up to maximize productivity and efficiency, which means minimizing awareness of the body. You sit in chairs that let you forget you have a body. You work under lighting that keeps you alert and mental. You structure your space to reduce physical needs like movement or rest. This environment reinforces the pattern of living in your head. Small changes create different cues. A stone in your pocket that you touch periodically throughout the day reminds you to notice sensation. A particular color dot on your computer screen catches your eye several times an hour and serves as a check-in prompt. Setting your phone to vibrate every 2 hours gives you a regular reminder to drop your attention into your body for 30 seconds. These external cues compensate for how automatic the thinking zone has become. You need something outside yourself to interrupt the pattern, until the interruption becomes more internal. The cues need to be specific enough to actually prompt action. Try to be more present doesn't work, because it's too vague and stays in the thinking zone. When you see the blue dot, put your hand on your chest for 3 breaths works, because it's concrete and physical. The specificity matters. Your brain needs clear instructions about what to do, not general intentions about what state to achieve. Movement throughout the day prevents the stagnation that builds when you stay sedentary in the thinking zone. Overthinkers often spend hours sitting still while their minds race. Your body accumulates tension that you don't notice because your attention is completely absorbed in thought. Regular movement interrupts this pattern and gives you information about what's happening physically that you've been missing. You don't need exercise or formal movement practice, though those can help. You need to move your body enough to feel it. Stand up from your desk every hour and stretch your arms overhead. Walk to get water not just because you're thirsty, but because the movement itself serves your regulation. Take the long route to wherever you're going. Use stairs instead of elevators when possible. These aren't about fitness. They're about maintaining connection to your body through physical sensation that's strong enough to compete with your thoughts. Shaking out tension discharges accumulated stress that builds up from hours in the thinking zone. Your body holds the emotional energy that your mind has been processing mentally rather than letting it move through your system. This energy gets stored as tension in your muscles and tightness in your chest and holding in your breath. Shaking gives it somewhere to go without requiring you to understand what the tension is about. Stand up right now. Shake your hands loosely for 10 seconds. Shake your arms. Roll your shoulders. Jump up and down a few times if you're somewhere you can do that. This looks silly and feels silly, which is part of why it works. You can't maintain your serious analytical mindset while your body is flopping around. The movement itself creates a state change that your thinking can't override. You do this a few times a day after difficult conversations, between tasks, when you notice tension building, and you prevent the accumulation of stress that eventually explodes as anxiety or shutdown. The hour before bed determines how you'll sleep more than anything else. Most people scroll devices, watch television, or work right up until they try to sleep. All of these activities keep you in the thinking zone. Your brain doesn't have time to downshift into a different state before you're expecting it to turn off completely. This doesn't work, which is why you lie awake with racing thoughts. Create a physical transition period. An hour before bed, dim the lights in your space. Light has physiological effects on your nervous system that go beyond keeping you awake. Bright light keeps you in alert mental mode. Lower light allows your body to start shifting toward rest. Turn off screens. The content doesn't matter as much as the medium screens keep your brain activated in ways that prevent the downshift you need. Spend that hour doing things that require body awareness. Stretching on the floor. Taking a hot bath or shower. Washing your face slowly and mindfully. Putting lotion on your hands and actually feeling the sensation. These activities redirect attention from thinking to sensing and give your nervous system permission to start moving towards sleep state. You're not trying to clear your mind. You're occupying your mind with physical sensation, so it's not spinning in thoughts. The hand on chest practice becomes your sleep tool when you get into bed. Lie down, put your hand on your chest, and feel your breathing. Your thoughts will be there, trying to review the day or plan tomorrow. Let them happen in the background while you keep your primary attention on your hand and your breathing. You're not fighting thoughts. You're just giving them less attention than you're giving to sensation. This usually leads to sleep faster than any sleep technique that tries to make your mind be quiet. Regression gives you information about what conditions push you back into old habits. You got sick and stopped your micro practices. You had a stressful week at work and defaulted to pure thinking mode. You were traveling and couldn't maintain your usual routines. These aren't failures. They're data about what makes your system vulnerable. You use that data to strengthen your approach rather than judging yourself for not being perfect. The return from regression matters more than never regressing. How quickly do you notice you've slipped back into pure thinking mode? What helps you reestablish connection with your body after losing it? What's the smallest practice you can do that gets you back on track? These questions point you toward a sustainable system rather than an all-or-nothing approach. You don't need to do everything perfectly. You need to notice when you've drifted and have accessible practices for returning. Checking in during stress looks different than checking in during calm. When you're activated, anxious, angry, overwhelmed, your body is flooded with sensation that might feel too intense to stay with. The hand on chest practice that works fine when you're calm might not be enough when you're flooded. This is why you need multiple tools at different intensities. Grounding through your feet works when chest and belly sensation feels overwhelming. Press your feet into the floor hard. Rock forward and back. Shift your weight from foot to foot. This redirects attention to your extremities, where sensation is less emotionally charged than in your torso. You're still connecting with your body, but you're working with a less activated area. Bilateral movement helps when your system is too wound up for stillness. Tap your hands on your thighs in an alternating rhythm. Left, right, left, right. March in place. Pat yourself down your arms and legs. The alternating left-right pattern has neurological effects that help regulate an activated nervous system. You're giving your system something to do with the activation energy instead of trying to suppress it. Cold water on your face or hands creates a strong enough physical sensation to interrupt even intense mental spiraling. This is emergency regulation for when nothing else is working. Your face in a sink of cold water or ice cubes in your hands gives your nervous system such strong input that it has to orient to the physical sensation. This isn't meant for daily use. This is for moments when you're completely stuck in thinking mode and need a shock to your system to get unstuck. Social connection affects regulation in ways you can't achieve alone. You can do all the personal practices and still need someone else's regulated nervous system to help regulate yours. This is how humans are built. We regulate through connection with each other. Your system calms down when you're near someone who's calm. Your capacity to feel expands when you're with someone who can hold emotion without fixing it. You need people in your life who won't pull you back into the thinking zone when you're trying to stay in the feeling zone. Most people respond to emotion by trying to solve it or explain it away. They get uncomfortable when you're upset and want to make you feel better, which means they're trying to get you to stop feeling. You need people who can let you feel without needing to change it. These people are rare and valuable. Finding even 1 or 2 people who can do this makes your personal regulation system much more sustainable. The practices you've learned become markers for which zone you're in. You're having a conversation, and you realize you haven't felt your body in the last 20 minutes. That realization tells you that you've been in pure thinking mode. You can check in right then, mid-conversation. Put your hand on your chest while the other person is talking. Feel your breathing. Notice what sensation is present. You've just dropped from thinking back into feeling while staying present in the conversation. This real-time adjustment prevents the accumulation of disconnection that used to build throughout the day. Previously, you might go hours completely in your head before noticing how disconnected you felt. Now you catch it sooner because you've practiced the redirect so many times that it's becoming more automatic. You still drift into thinking mode regularly, but you don't stay there as long before you notice and choose to return to your body. Tracking patterns over time shows you what triggers your retreat into the thinking zone. Certain people consistently pull you into your head. Particular situations make you lose touch with your body. Specific topics of conversation activate your analytical mind so strongly that sensation disappears. This isn't about avoiding these triggers. This is about knowing they exist so you can be more intentional about maintaining body awareness when they show up. You're about to see a person who tends to make you overthink. You know this now from tracking your patterns. Before you meet with them, you take 2 minutes to check in with your body. Hand on chest, notice breathing, feel your feet on the floor. You've just created a baseline of body awareness that gives you something to return to during the interaction. You'll still get pulled into thinking, but you'll notice it faster and have a clearer sense of what being in your body feels like as a contrast. Morning pages or journaling can support your system if they're done from the feeling zone rather than the thinking zone. Most people journal as a thinking exercise, analyzing their day, solving problems, working through situations mentally. This keeps you in your head even though you're writing about feelings. Journaling from the feeling zone means writing from sensation and letting your thoughts follow rather than leading with analysis. You sit down to write, and you check in with your body first. What sensation is most present right now? You describe that sensation. Then you notice what thoughts or memories that sensation brings up, and you write about those. You're working from body to mind instead of from mind to body. The writing stays connected to physical experience rather than becoming pure mental content. This kind of writing actually helps you integrate feeling and thinking rather than staying stuck in only thinking. Voice notes serve the same function for people who process better through speaking. You record yourself describing what you're feeling in your body right now. You speak about sensation first and let thoughts emerge from that. This keeps you tethered to the feeling zone while you're working through something verbally. The recording captures things you'd forget if you were only thinking about them. And you can listen back to hear what was true for you in that moment, rather than relying on your analytical mind's interpretation of what happened. Celebrations matter more than you think. Your thinking zone will tell you that you should already be better at this, that small progress doesn't count, that you're still not where you need to be. This is the voice that has been driving you toward disconnection for years. What if you actively celebrated every time you caught yourself in thinking mode and redirected to your body? Every time you spoke from sensation instead of rehearsal. Every time you noticed tension and moved to release it. The celebration doesn't need to be big. You just acknowledge what you did. I noticed I was overthinking, and I put my hand on my chest. That's it. You're training your nervous system to recognize these moments as wins instead of barely adequate responses to a problem you shouldn't have in the first place. Your system learns through positive reinforcement more than through criticism. Celebrating the redirects makes them more likely to happen because your brain starts associating them with reward, rather than with being yet another thing you have to manage. Different seasons of life require different regulation approaches. When you're stressed and busy, your micro practices need to be even smaller and more frequent, because you have less capacity for anything that feels like an addition to your load. When you're going through grief or major transition, your practices might need to be more intensive because your system is dealing with bigger emotions. When you're in a calm period, you can experiment with practices that take more time or feel less urgent. The system evolves. What works now might not work in 6 months because your capacity will have changed and your needs will be different. You're not building something fixed. You're developing flexibility in how you relate to your experience and which tools you use to stay connected to your body. Some practices will fall away because they no longer serve you. New ones will emerge because you've developed enough body awareness to notice what you need that you couldn't feel before. Support from others makes everything easier, but can't replace your personal practice. Someone can remind you to check in with your body, but they can't do the checking in for you. Someone can notice when you're stuck in your head and help you drop into sensation, but they can't build your capacity to do that independently. The personal regulation system you're creating is yours. Other people can support it, but the daily micro-practices and the real-time redirects and the awareness of your patterns, those develop through your own repeated experience. What you're building is a completely different relationship with yourself. Instead of living exclusively in analysis and interpretation, you're learning to inhabit your body and feel your emotions directly. Instead of preparing and rehearsing everything before it comes out of your mouth, you're learning to trust spontaneous expression. Instead of waiting until you're flooded to try to regulate, you're maintaining baseline connection with your body that makes regulation accessible when you need it. This happens through the accumulation of small practices repeated so often that they become your new default, rather than something you have to consciously remember to do. The practices in this chapter aren't additional tasks to complete. They're ways of doing what you're already doing with different attention. You're already waking up, showering, waiting, transitioning between activities. You're already having conversations, experiencing emotions, and going to bed. Every single thing described here fits into the life you already have without requiring extra time. What changes is where your attention goes during these existing moments, and how that attention shapes your capacity to feel connected instead of trapped in your head.